anything else but not Mwea Rice Mill, Honorable Speaker. Because members of parliament must be here on the floor to defend and represent the interest of the people who elected them, Honorable Speaker. And I cannot let them down in this day and time. And I want to promise the people of Mwea that I will continue pushing and aggravating for the issues on this floor, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, they have been requested to attend a public participation in Nyeri, Honorable Speaker. How do you ask the people of Mwea to go and record their grievances in Nyeri, Honorable Speaker, in regard to Mwea Rice Mills, Honorable Speaker? Why don't we make public participation easier for the Kenyan people and accessible to ensure that it is done at the point of instance, Honorable Speaker, so that our people can tell the government, Honorable Speaker, that they do not want the Mwea Rice Mill sold or given to any private entity, Honorable Speaker. It is the sweat of their grandfathers. It is the sweat of their grandparents, Honorable Speaker. They have a right to have a say, and I have a duty to ensure that I have communicated that on the floor so that we can ensure that our people are part and parcel of the decision-making of the government, Honorable Speaker. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you, the Honorable Danga of Matayos.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Let me also add my voice on the motion on food security and nutrition as moved here by my good friend, Honorable Haji. I want to really state that food security must be prioritized for any nation. Dependence on food from other parts of the world outside our own region and our country should be something that we really should detest. Because the moment we continue relying on imports of food, then we lose our own nationality, we lose our own pride, we remain beggars, and those who give us food will always keep us in ransom. We don't retain the independence that we have as a country. So really, giving effect to the Maputo Declaration, which suggests and proposes that countries should come up with, and within their budgets, they should at least give 10% of their budgets to matters agriculture and food production, is very critical, and each one of us has to support this particular motion because of giving credit and also supporting the Maputo Declaration so that we have enough food. In this country, for instance, we still have stunted children when we move around. Stunted children meaning they are not getting the right diets, they are malnutrited, you know, they don't have enough quantities and qualities of food as required. This is something that we should really not be having in a country like Kenya. And therefore, our government needs to prioritize issues of food security, look at nutrition. Even in schools, our children, I think, need to be given food so that they look healthy, they are not stunted, we don't have kwashiorkor and all those diseases that go with malnutrition. Mr. Speaker, sir, I also would like to suggest that our governments ensure that seeds are supplied to the farmers, fertilizer is supplied and subsidized and reach all parts of the country. We should have fertilizers and we should have seeds for planting. Now it's raining heavily and the planting season is coming ahead. Government must plan for this and ensure that we have enough seeds, we have subsidized fertilizers for our farmers to make sure that we have enough food. Recently, I attended a meeting in Kampala that meeting was about the African grain trade. And it was noted that we don't have enough grains in East Africa, in Kenya also. And we are even importing these grains from even war-torn countries. The war in Ukraine and Russia, you can imagine that those countries still are exporting grains to us. When we have fertile soils, we have enough rainfall, Mheshimiwa Haji, what are we doing? And we have a strong workforce which is idle in our youth. How do we put them to use? These are issues that we really need to address to ensure that we have food security and good, good nutrition for our children. Mr. Speaker, I support.
Wakili Muriu.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to support this motion on food security. Mr. Speaker, matters of food, that's why they're called basic. It is the foundation of Maslow, whereby it's food, shelter, and clothing, which becomes the bedrock of human dignity. And therefore, the conversation about food supersedes any other conversation, Mr. Speaker, especially where this country has become food insufficient. And therefore, Madam Mr. Speaker, if this country cannot be able to come up with a green plan to ensure that we can eradicate malnutrition among our children, where people go hungry, or where we give food donation, then it means, Mr. Speaker, our policies are missing, and we need to readdress and recalibrate our policies, especially on food security. Mr. Speaker, you saw the other day when there was a bit of drought, our communities, even places like Central Kenya, you can hear cries of people where they're saying they want to be supported with food, and they want to congratulate the government because it came through at that very, very key moment. But again, that's giving people fish is not sufficient. What we need to do, Mr. Speaker, sir, is to come up with clear policies on, before we talk even about industrialization, putting up roads, we make sure that every sector, every area of this country is producing enough food for our people. Mr. Speaker, I want to commend the government in their policy in terms of cheap fertilizer, which they are going for 2,500. I also commend the government for the policy on making sure that all the colonial dams are being rehabilitated, so at least again we can be able to make sure that our people are able to grow their food, in particular because of the climate change. The rainfall is no longer dependable. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, that's why I'm supporting this motion. On the issue about the food, Mr. Speaker, we can talk about food production, but without addressing the question on whether our primary school and junior secondary school students are being fed, Mr. Speaker, we are missing the point. My quick reading on Article 57, 1A, it says clearly, every child of this country has a right to quality education. When I look at Section B of the same article of the Constitution, it says every child is entitled to quality nutrition. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, sir, the issue about food does not only talk about food for adults. We need to see how the motion which passed before this parliament, whereby we pass a motion that every child in junior secondary school, every child in primary school, as we provide them with learning materials, as we provide them with books, as we provide them with desks and good classes, matters of nutrition are constitutional. And therefore, as we plan to grow food for our people, as we plan to have a green plan to make sure that there's enough food, feeding our children at that level is very critical, because that's the only way, Mr. Speaker, number one, we can breathe life to Article 57, and breathe life to Article 27 of the Constitution, but at the same time, make sure that a hungry child cannot learn, but a child which is well-fed, our investment in education will bear fruit because they are well-fed, they have good nutrition, they are healthy, and therefore we can be able to get the fruition of our investment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I support.
Honorable Mulanya, Member of Parliament, Nambale. My friend, what's out of order? Honorable Member.
Honorable Speaker, I rise on Standing Order 95, noting the mood of the House in support of this report. May the mover be allowed now to called upon to reply.
But I wish you had come after me giving before giving Mulanya a chance, because I have the discretion not to go your direction. And now that I had given a honorable member, Mr. Mulanya, I would ask Mulanya to proceed.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for giving me this chance to give a contribution on this motion, despite the attempts by my good friend, Honorable Abraham, to gag my views on the same. Mr. Speaker, food security is very important for our nation. And we have had this debate in our country for a very long time. We note that we are just come from a very serious drought in this country, where we had serious hunger in the nation. Right now, we are blessed with heavy rains. And also we had a bumper harvest. But the problem is that after 1 year, again our people will be suffering. The question that we ask ourselves as a nation, are we prepared for future? And then I will say no, because if we had a bumper harvest, then 1 year down the line, again next year, we start having our people complaining about lack of food, then we'll say that as a nation we'll be failing. I therefore propose that the government should take serious measures, first of all, to have enough storage facilities. In cases where we had a good bumper harvest like this year, we should store food that can keep our nation for a period of more than 3 years. Secondly, we also need to look at the issue of the land tenure system. We talk of food security, but we know very well that we farm in the land that is available. But as we continue to subdivide this land, we will not have in future a place where we'll be able to now grow our crops. So as a nation, we need to come up with a policy to ensure that we control the subdivision of land, especially the arable land, where we are supposed to be farming, so that we have security for future production. Then we are looking at funding of agricultural research institutes, so that farmers can have improved seed varieties to suit the changing climatic conditions. We know that after some time, when we walk around the nation, like I was in Ambale constituency, in some areas, they were telling me that the maize they planted, they are currently not doing well. So we need to have the researchers moving around to ensure that this particular seed variety, why is it that instead of the crop maturing, it's rotting in the farm because of the heavy rains? So we need to ensure that our research institutes are well funded so that they can give us proper seeds that can withstand the change in climatic conditions. Third, I also wish to encourage the government to ensure that the issue of storage of water, currently we're experiencing heavy rains in the country. We are seeing floods all over, but we will be shocked that 2 years down the line, we'll be importing rice from Egypt. And yet, we have areas in our country that can produce rice. Like in Ambale constituency, we have the Malanga Mukemo irrigation scheme that was surveyed by the National Irrigation Authority, but to date, they have no funds to execute this particular project. if we can have rice as an alternative to maize, we'll have that, the season when our farmers can farm maize, then the short rains, they can also resort to rice, which will improve on the supply of the food within our people. I therefore rise to support this motion and say, request the government to put in place proper mechanism to ensure that we protect our people from hunger. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very well, honorable members. A member had risen for misplace on standing order number 95 that the mover be called upon to reply. But I did use also my discretion powers bestowed to me to allow Honorable Mulanya, who was already on his feet, to speak on this matter. So may I put the question, is it the mood in the House that the mover be asked to reply? Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will those as of contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. The mover, you may proceed.
Okay, thank you so much, Speaker. I give 1 minute to Honorable Umani and 1 minute to the lady from Kisii.
Move, I hope there was urgency and that's why you are being called upon to reply. So, but just give to 2 and then proceed to reply.
Okay, thank you so much. 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I support this motion because our food security is paramount and nutrition as well. Our country once used to be the basket of East Africa, and as we continue joking around, I can see that we are going to be among the people who will be malnutritioned in Africa, and people might not be coming to Kenya to see the animals. They'll be coming to see the malnutritioned people in Africa. So food security is a priority. It's critical to our nation, and we have to do something urgently by protecting what we have first, not losing it, and also making sure that we do not engage in things that will bring in GMO. Like Kenya seed is already being sold, that will bring the foreigners to start controlling what seed Kenyans should be planting. So food security is a priority in Kenya, and it's a must that all Kenyans have to participate in making sure that we do not miss out in having enough to feed our people. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Speaker. When we are talking about food security,
I believe that's Honorable Donya.
Yeah, Donya, Kisii. Why it has come timely, like now, Mr. Speaker, when there are these heavy rains, our infrastructure has rendered the farmers' produce not to get to the market. As we support and Parliament raises its eyes open, we also factor that part of infrastructure so that we don't have farmers' produce rotting at home. Another thing, Mr. Speaker, as I finalize, there are so many children who go to school because the feeding programs that happen at school. If we take good care and guard our food security, we will have more children going to school, because there are those who go to school because they've been attracted with the fact that they are given food at school. So I support the honorable member for bringing up this, and we hope what we've deliberated will be of good essence to our people. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mover.
Honorable Speaker, sir, if it is okay with you, the chairman of the Agricultural Committee has asked for 1 minute, and I don't mind donating to him. Okay.
No, we don't grant you that one. Proceed to move.
Thank you very much.
Proceed to reply.
Thank you for the guidance. I beg to reply this report, and that what is very critical in this is that as legislatures, as members of parliament, we need to ensure that the various legal framework for food production and nutrition is given priority And also, we need to make sure that conventions, international conventions that we have signed, such as the Malabo Declaration, is adhered to. What is very important in a country like ours, whose economic background, whose economic background is agriculture, family farming is very important. We have very little commercial farms in this country. The family farming is what is contributing to our food security and nutrition in this country. And therefore, as parliamentarians, we have to give full support to our farmers, small-scale farmers, because they contribute to 80% of the food we have. Also, this being the era of climate change, we should come up with business unusual. Business cannot be the same because we are no longer able to predict the timing of the rain, the intensity of the rains, and plant or grow our crops as per the way we used to do it. Now we have to rely heavily on forecasts from our meteorological department, which they did very well this year. They warned us early enough that there is El Nino, and therefore farmers had to stop a little bit to wait for a lot of the waters to pass through and pass it. The other thing is, in terms of education, unless our children get adequate and nutritious food, we shall not develop in our education sector. Because the brain development of a child depends on nutritious food. Of course, the most important nutritious food that we need to start with a child is the breastfeeding milk, the milk from the mother. The milk from the mother is the most important one, particularly in the first 1,000 days. If a child misses that milk from the mother, and then thereafter, the child is not supported with nutritious food, then whichever school you take that child, the child's performance might be affected. With these few remarks, I beg to move. Thank you.
Very well, we shall put the question at a later date or a later time. Next order, but before the next order, honorable members, when my business when I'm in the chair is actually to give you, honorable members, a chance to speak on these motions. So when you move from your place and actually indicate that the mover be called upon to reply, and you also proceed to go ahead and vote that happened, then we really must go that direction. Instead of the chair now taking over to start distributing chances to members, honorable members, to speak. So next order.
Order number 13, motion, sessional paper number 2 of 2023 on the national tax policy.
Chair of Finance.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. So, Honorable Speaker, I rise to move that the House adopts a report on the Committee on Finance and National Planning on its consideration of the session of paper number 2 of 2023 on the national tax policy, laid on the table of the House on Thursday, the 23rd of November 2023, and approves session paper number 2 of 2023 on the national tax policy as recommended with amendments in the report. Honorable Speaker, before setting out the specific provisions of the policy, it behoves us to understand that the motivation behind this policy. Since independence, our country has had several tax legislations that have guided the tax measures the country undertakes. However, there has never been a single policy that acts as a guide for the country to ensure fairness and equity in the tax system. This has seen the tax system in the country being unpredictable, making it difficult to create certainty in tax rates and tax bases. Honorable Speaker, the policy is part of the national government's efforts to enhance transparency in tax practices and forms a basis for tax reforms and review of existing tax legislation in future. Honorable Speaker, the key challenges identified in the tax system by the national tax policy include: 1, a growing tax expenditure; 2, complexities in taxation of emerging economies such as because of emerging economies and technologies such as the online business, cryptocurrencies, and digital assets. 3, low tax compliance. 4, challenges in international taxation. And 5, lack of guidelines for treaty negotiation. And lastly, delay in settlement of tax disputes. Honorable Speaker, why do we need a national tax policy? The rationale of the national tax policy is to grow the tax revenue. The tax reforms within the confines of the national tax policy will enhance domestic resource mobilization required to finance the government's development agenda and reduce the country's fiscal deficit. Honorable Speaker, I say you cannot claim to be independent or sovereign if you cannot finance your budget. As long as you're relying on other people's resources, then your independence and your sovereignty as a country is under threat. And 2, to provide legal framework for introducing tax incentives. This policy is critical, therefore, in guiding the management and monitoring of the action of the tax incentives to safeguard the tax base and ensure value for money. And 3, to provide guidance, ensure certainty, and establish coherence in light of any future amendments to national tax law. Frequent changes in tax laws cause unpredictability and inefficiency in tax administration, and this creates distortions which impose additional costs to taxpayers and revenue administration. This also will enhance structures for information gathering and sharing, and so this policy provides guidelines for enhancing information gathering and sharing to support revenue mobilization and protect the tax base. In terms of efficiency in how we manage our tax refunds, the tax refunds process is lengthy and constrained by inadequate information. The unpaid refunds will hold the working capital of the taxpayers and therefore imposing liquidity constraints on businesses. And this policy seeks now to provide guidelines for ensuring timely processing of tax refunds. The Finance Act of 2023, you may recall, allows now businesses to be able to claim their input VAT across other tax brackets. So this, Honorable Speaker, is an even a better provide an even better enabling environment for businesses to thrive, not just by, in terms of tax refunds, not just by claiming their input tax, but also ensuring that the refunds are actually budgeted for and paid timely to these businesses and therefore safeguard their working capital. And lastly, Honorable Speaker, address complexities in our tax legislation and administration. There has been complexities relating to tax administration legislation. For example, the computation of tax liabilities, filing of tax returns, and the interpretation of various tax laws. These complexities affect the ease of doing business in the country, and this policy therefore provides guidelines of how to address these complexities in tax legislation and administration. Honorable Speaker, in accordance with Article 118 of the Constitution, the committee undertook public participation, and as a result, we received views from 22 stakeholders who gave their submissions, majorly who lauded the policy, noting that stability and predictability of taxes are key to supporting the growth of business and investments in the country. Honorable Speaker, to address the unpredictability of tax rates, the policy recommends a comprehensive review of taxes every 5 years. The guidelines and principles of tax policy will be vital in enhancing transparency in tax policies, addressing the challenges that have plagued the Kenyan tax system for a very long time. And this policy, therefore, will ensure that there is no frequent tax changes in tax laws and strengthen economic operations of a country. If you may recall, Honorable Speaker, around the month of April, that's when we received the finance bill, which takes around up to the up to that year of June for approval. So in the month of April, May, and June, on any particular year, the business environment is uncertain because there is no clear, it's not absolutely clear what decisions Parliament would adopt in terms of the tax proposals that are made around that time. Then after it's passed in July, apart from this time, when you only have 2 amendments that are touching on taxes, then you'll find a miscellaneous bill coming around September or October, again changing either a few tax rates or interpretation of a tax law. And then immediately after that, then we again now go to the next cycle. And remember again, even after the Finance Act is assented to by the President, on around the 1st of July, there is usually, Finance Act is always litigated in court. So there's another 2 months again of not knowing what the courts will decide. So around all this time, it sets a very bad precedence to the business, sends the wrong message, and therefore, many businesses are not able to have proper tax planning to know these are the areas to invest, this is how to make sure we are compliant. And again, even after now those decisions are made, then it also takes some time before the Kenya Revenue Authority updates their system towards now the new tax law. So this policy now is seeking to address that so that we have a predictable tax environment, that if you set up a business in Kenya, you are certain that your tax obligations for the next 1 year or for the next 2 years are not likely to fundamentally change, so that we ensure that we become marketable as a country as an investment destination of choice, and also in terms of ease of doing business. Honorable Speaker, the overall objective of this policy is to guide the progressive development and administration of Kenya's tax system. The specific objectives include: 1, to offer policy guidance on the collection, enforcement, and administration of taxes; 2, to provide the basis of review and development of tax laws; and 3, provide guidelines to stakeholders, including investors, on tax policy matters; 4, provide guiding principles for the Kenyan tax system; and 5, to provide a legal framework for granting tax incentives and concessions to various sectors of the economy. Honorable Speaker, what are some of the things that the committee recommended for amendment or revision? So the policy shall offer solutions to the ailing tax system by promoting equality in tax administration and providing policy guidelines that will guide the collection of taxes. For instance, Kenya has a huge untaxed informal sector that the government can tap into by having innovative ways of increasing our tax base. The policy will also act as a guide to any future tax laws to protect taxpayers, support economic development, and enhance the country's competitive edge, promote economic diversification, guarantee value for money and business, and establish tax incentives and exemption scheme that is aligned with Kenya's development agenda. Honorable Speaker, it is paramount to have a policy that protects the taxpayers, so that we ensure that the rights and the freedom of the taxpayers is safeguarded. And this policy, Honorable Speaker, is meant to do that. The National Tax Policy of 2023 shall create predictability in tax laws, banalizing the challenges present in the current tax regime and setting objectives and guidelines to address them. The policy will be aligned with the medium-term revenue strategy with an aim of economic recovery and government's agenda on bottom-up economic transformation agenda better. Honorable Speaker, the policy guidelines aim to solve the present challenges affecting revenue collection by expanding the tax base, having the international best tax practices in tax administration, and developing a framework for granting incentives. The committee, Honorable Speaker, proposes the expansion of the scope of the hard-to-tax sectors to include the digital sector, which is a large sector that has remained untaxed. The 3 sectors are digital economy, informal, and agriculture. The policy shall provide more innovative ways to expand the tax base, and there is a need to provide alternative ways to tax the informal sector. For instance, possible use of withholding taxes, which require business to withhold taxes at source when making payments to what these sectors we are calling the hard tax sectors. The committee has proposed amendment to the national tax policy to provide for an efficient funding structure that ensures that the settlement of approved tax refunds are actually refunded and actually paid within 6 months. Currently, there is no model for tax refunds, which has created challenges for businesses, where funds are withheld for long periods, reducing their working capital. An efficient structure ensures that the refunds are made within a short period and taxpayers can plan ahead. And what is interesting, Honorable Speaker, until we did this amendment on the Finance Act, if you owed KRA money, if KRA owed you money, for example, on input VAT, and you still were meant to pay other taxes like PAE and corporate tax, and you applied for a refund, and they don't pay you, they don't refund to you, but the amount of money they're supposed to pay them would accrue interest and penalties, and yet they actually owe you money. That's why now that amendment was critical to ensure that now you can net off your liabilities on other taxes. But you may find yourself where you you, for example, have stopped doing business. So you KRA owes you money, input VAT, but you're not likely to, maybe you stop that business or move to something else, and therefore you're not likely to be in a situation where you'll be able to offset that tax against any other tax. So this now provides a guideline that there must be, Treasury must allocate funds for approved tax refunds so that those tax refunds are actually made within 6 months after their approval. The committee has proposed to amend the policy to ensure that tax expenditures estimates are explicitly provided in the annual budget estimates presented before the National Assembly during the budgeting cycle to improve budget transparency, and that the policy obligates the National Treasury to publicize reports on these annual tax expenditures. Honorable Speaker, further, the policy will set out a progressive tax band structure that ensures that the marginal rate is not higher than the corporate income tax rate. Currently, the marginal rate of 35% is 5% higher than the corporate income tax of 30%. This means that only are individuals taxed at a rate higher than corporations, but also a higher tax base, considering that individuals are taxed on their gross earnings, while corporations can claim deductions for the expenses incurred in the production of their income. Individuals are not allowed to claim deductions. This what essentially means. If you check how corporation tax is calculated, you take the profit of an entity, then you less what you call allowable deductions, and then you apply the 30% corporation tax on that net income. But if you check the way payee is deducted, individuals are not allowed to deduct. Individuals are not allowed to have deductions on their payee, on their income. So to give an example, when a company makes a profit of 100,000 shillings, they're allowed to make deductions of the expenses incurred to gain that income, what we call them allowable expenses. And then we take 30% of now that net and calculate that as their corporation tax. But if you go to an individual who earns a salary of 100,000 shillings, the only deductible allowance is contribution to NSSF to a particular percentage. Then all the rest of that is applied to one basic rate. So it actually means that salaried people therefore end up paying higher taxes than corporations. So this national policy now seeks now to amend that so that we have now individuals paying the same as corporate, so that there's no that preferential treatment. And this will also help reduce tax planning, where now some individuals might find it easier to operate as a company rather than as an employee of that company. So instead of you and if you're operating, Speaker and I are operating a business, instead of us earning a salary from that business, then it saves you more money by incorporating that business as a company and earning dividend as directors of that company rather than being employees of the company. That's what I mean. And part of the views we received from the public were, for example, to allow for deductions if you have children, because actually it means that if you are, say, a member of a family, and so you are the breeder in that family, that means that the burden on you providing for that family is higher than probably someone who doesn't have a family. Those are some of the interesting views that we're actually receiving, saying that allow me to deduct my monthly expenses like food before now you calculate a pay. And consequently, so this amendment now is seeking now to have, this now tax policy is now seeking to have at least a fair structure, whether you are body corporate or an individual paying under, whether it's under the corporation tax or under the income payee or income tax or the Income Tax Act. Honorable Speaker, this policy also proposed an amendment to the policy so that pensions that are now currently treated as, so that we ensure that pensions are treated using exempt taxation method, rather than the current system where although your contributions are exempt, the payment eventually is not. So now we want to make sure that we have an exempt, so that we ensure that pensions are not taxed at all. And this will, in addition now, provide for an inflation adjustment on pensions every 5 years to keep the pace with inflation, the high cost of living, and increase, and we're saying also the increasing tax burden on salaried people or payroll-related services that individuals, especially in the formal sector, this is what now this also aims to cure. Honorable Speaker, the policy will also ensure that the granting of income tax incentive or exemption is only targeted to manufacturing investments, and the same sustained for not less than 5 years to allow the growth of these sectors and certainty in the business environment. This is where also, Honorable Speaker, we've not been doing very well, where we come up with tax incentives, whether it is in investment deductions or these are the tax incentives we give to manufacturers, only for us to change them 1 or 2 years later. The cost of setting up, for example, a manufacturing plant is highly capital intensive. And not just now the capital, even the time. You find some manufacturing plants will take up to 5 years to just set up. So if someone comes into the country and then takes time to take a full 5 years to set up a plant, hoping to benefit from particular tax incentives, only for you to change those incentives along the way, then you are definitely going to lose that investor, Honorable Speaker. So we're hoping that, the policy is recommending that these tax incentives will only be meant for manufacturers, and that these manufacturers will have the incentives won't be changed for a period of 5 years, so that we ensure that we give them enough time to even get a return on the investment and promote Kenya as an investment destination of choice. Honorable Speaker, the excess duty provides that it should only be charged on luxury goods, communication services, and other goods. And the other goods category, as captured in the draft policy, should not include essential goods, basic necessity goods, food items, whether imported or locally made, medicament, and agriculture-related products. Traditional, Honorable Speaker, excise duty has always been a sin tax, and has always been said to be supposed to be charged on luxury goods or products and service products that are harmful, so that you discourage their consumption. For example, alcohol, tobacco, gaming. But we have seen over time excise duty being applied on many other products which are not necessarily whether luxurious or what we call like syntax. So the amendments that we are advocating for, we approved, and hoping that this committee, this House, agrees with us, is to ensure that excise duty only remains on those particular items. The policy has approved that only optimal rate of excise duty should be charged to enhance predictability, to enhance certainty and predictability before any excise duty is levied in the future. So we're also looking at ensuring that we get what we call in the optimal rate. So that, because remember, Honorable Speaker, what you call the Laffer curve, where we say increase in taxes will lead to an increase in income in terms of revenue collection up to a particular level. Beyond that, then you're going to see a reduction in taxes. So we're advocating for having an optimal tax rate, where we have the policy drivers now sitting down and find out what is the optimal rate, so that we have good collections, Honorable Speaker, but again, so that any further increase on what we call the Laffer curve doesn't lead to decrease in collection. Honorable Speaker, the policy also provide that prior to the government making any proposal or amendment to the East African Community Customs Management Act or Customs Administration in general, they should undergo public participation, and National Assembly's approval must be granted. Upon enactment, these regulations should undergo the National Assembly's approval as per the Statutory Instruments Act, and this also
2 minutes.
This will also apply to double tax agreements. So, Honorable Speaker, the debate we even had yesterday on KRA and the airports is a result of that East African Customs Management Act. Our Constitution talks about there cannot be taxation without representation. But you find now this Council of Ministers recommend particular taxes through the East African Communities Management Act that not come to National Assembly for approval. So we are providing that in this policy, before the ministers make those proposals to East African community, and after they make them, they must come to this National Assembly for approval, so that we make sure that we are in adherence with the Constitution and the policy of no taxation without representation as enshrined in our Constitution. Honorable Speaker, the policy will ensure that there is a renegotiation framework for double taxation agreements to ensure that the instruments are kept up to pace with the current business realities in the relevant countries. We have a lot of double taxation agreements between countries that have not been properly negotiated and have not come to this Parliament for approval. The policy will also provide for the inclusion of an implementation matrix that will guide the implementation of the tax policy. The implementation matrix will, among other things, capture timelines, responsibilities, actors, and costs. Further, it will provide for an independent entity to oversee the implementation of the policy. And this will be required to be submitted to the National Assembly quarterly, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, this policy will also include a risk management and mitigating framework to guide on any risk arising from the policy. With those many remarks, Honorable Speaker, I beg to move. I would like to ask Legal Counsel Honorable Moreu to second.
Proceed, Honorable Moremi.
Mr. Speaker, I want to second the proposed amendment to our taxation laws and policy. Mr. Speaker, any country which is in the threshold of economic takeover, economic progress, must have certain taxation regime which is predictable to enable the investors plan as they prepare to do the investment. Mr. Speaker, remember the tax is one of the key lines of expenses. And before any investor decides to invest in any venture, including Mama Mboga, he must consider the tax regime and its predictability. Second, Mr. Speaker, this country has close to about 2.8 million young people who are looking for jobs. Every day, I receive calls from young people in the Gatanga constituency looking for opportunities to work. And the only way we can be able to ensure that we are able to attract investors who can put up factories, who can be able to put up businesses to employ our young people is to have a certain and predictable taxation regime. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, you also may find that there are instances where organizations like Kenya Power, which, as you know very well, they negotiated what you call loop-sided power purchase agreements, whereby they purchased very expensive thermal power at the expense of Kenyans' businesses. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, I want to take this opportunity. Now that our dams are full, now that our hydro dams are full and ready, we want to see a total reduction of our bills in our homes, in our factories, so at least we can be able to enjoy this, what we are calling El Nino. It has one side which is whereby our people are getting flooded, but on the other hand, Mr. Speaker, we expect Kenya Power to reduce the tariffs, to switch off the thermals and use the hydro power, so at least our factories can be able to increase production, the costs of goods and services can become cheaper, and factories can be able to employ our people. And finally, Mr. Speaker, I also want to say this. As we address the issue of aligning and making our taxation regime, straighten it up and predictable, I also want to urge Kenyans that we have a key responsibility to pay our debts. A country which forgoes repaying their debts becomes an international pariah. We have instances whereby countries like Ghana, country like Zambia, country like Ethiopia, country like Sri Lanka, today their currencies are totally devalued. They can't be able to get any financial support from international money markets. The government, in exercise of their sovereignty, it is raiding on the citizens' accounts, taking away money to go and pay and support the government expenses in the name of supporting the sovereignty. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, as we also align our rules and regulations and streamlining our taxation rules, I want Kenyans to understand that we must be able to pay our debtors. We must be able to pay our obligation, so at least this country can survive, because and ensure that we protect our citizens from those adverse effects of failing to pay our taxes and failing to pay our our debt obligation. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, I support. Thank you.
Honorable Mreo, you are seconding. So you please go on record.
Sorry, Mr. Speaker. Yes, I was seconding the proposed amendments in the. I second, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable members, I now propose the question that this House adopts the report of the Departmental Committee on Finance and National Planning on its consideration of the sessional paper number 2 of 2023 on the national tax policy laid on the table of the House on Thursday, 23rd November 2023, and approves sessional paper number 2 of 2023 on the national tax policy as recommended in the report. So who takes the first bite? I see Honorable John Mutunga.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I wish to commend the committee on finance for coming up with this sessional paper, which is a policy guideline paper for taxation in this country. Honorable Speaker, the mover and the seconder have articulated very well that unless we have predictability in the tax regimes, we dissuade a country to do a lot of business, a country to have attraction. Attraction for investment in a country is dependent on the cost of investment in that particular country. And Honorable Speaker, lack of predictable tax environment is really dissuading in terms of people, deciding to put their money. Investments will not come for a few days, it won't come for a few years, it's for a long term. And since it is long term, there is need for predictability. So this policy paper is key in terms of ensuring that anyone who is interested in doing business in Kenya knows exactly what kind of tax environment they are going to find this country having, or what will be the prevailing tax environment. Honorable Speaker, the incidental tax changes cause a lot of discontent among citizens. It also can erroneously dissuade investment, and I want to be very clear on this. Honorable Speaker, whenever we have a budget in this country, and whenever we are trying to fund a budget, we look at the various ways in which we can get money. And our government can get money in a variety of ways. One of them is international trade. The other one is the changes in the currency. For instance, the valuation or devaluation of our currency. There are many other ways. And the key among them is taxation. And this country has majored a lot on taxation as a source of income. Being a source of income, my friends in the opposition, Honorable Speaker, use this taxation measure to basically fight the government unfairly. If you listen to them talking sometimes, you hear them saying that Kenya is the most taxed country in the world. And Honorable Speaker, they speak out of no empirical evidence. And we cannot have empirical evidence unless we are able to refer. There is no material they can refer to. So these are statements made by individuals based on their own understanding of a situation that is not documented. Having a sessional paper or having a policy document that prescribes the tax regime over time is key to basically enable us also make references. It is key to also enable us not to allow polarization of the citizenry in terms of telling the Kenyans that they are most taxed country in the world. I do not think there is any evidence such statements that, that back up such statements. Honorable Speaker, there is need for prospective investors to know there will be a spirit of fairness in handling their business over time, because they will invest for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. They need to know that there is a stable base upon which they will be required to make payments to our government for the services and even for the business operating environment. And that is why taxation policy is important. It is also possible for us to make comparisons with other countries. We cannot compare without having a base and document, a benchmark. This particular policy statement brings in that benchmark, which is key for us to be able to compare Kenya with Uganda, Kenya with Rwanda, Kenya with Indonesia, and other countries. And therefore, in our packaging for investment from other countries, the foreign direct investment, then we shall be able to talk clearly on having a reliable tax regime. Madam Speaker, people may not understand the incentives unless they are clearly outlined in a policy document. People may not understand the waivers. People may not understand the process of even claiming for the VAT that they probably will pay. Some do not even know that there is payment, there is claim for some of these payments. And Honourable Speaker, that is why this policy document is very, very important. To finalize, Honourable Speaker, to wind off, let me just say that we need such a document so that people can be able to correctly refer. I have been in a situation where a member of parliament misquoted Kenya Power and Lighting and said that there are some people who are charged more than others. There are regions who are charged more than others. Honourable Speaker, I went through an experimentation of paying for two differently located places using the payment system that basically.
The Honourable Timothy Toroitich is in the House.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, for giving me an opportunity to contribute on this very important motion. Honourable Speaker, I rise to support this sessional paper number 2 on the national tax policy. Honourable Speaker, I'm quite surprised that we have not had a national tax policy in this country. I'm surprised that this is the first national tax policy, and that is why there have been problems in this country in respect to taxation. Honourable Speaker, it is true that the economy of this country, or the budget of this country, is financed majorly through taxation. And Honourable Speaker, it is time that we have a tax policy that is transparent, that is inclusive, that is credible, and that is predictable. Honourable Speaker, so that we avoid the issue of haphazard taxation of Kenyans through various regimes of law without a proper tax policy in place. Honourable Speaker, in this country we have had problems. We have had people who have moved out of the country because of tax policies or taxation regimes that are not favorable. Honourable Speaker, we have a sad case in place. In Eldoret, we have Medill Hospital. The proprietor of Medill Hospital is almost closing shop. Honourable Speaker, as we speak, thousands of people in this country are losing jobs because Medill Hospital is moving outside Kenya because of tax regimes. They are moving to Uganda, to Tanzania. So I call upon even the chair of the committee, as we look at the national tax policy, let us do a comparative analysis, a comparative study, so that we know the kind of tax that we impose in Kenya must be equivalent or even lower to what other countries enforce or impose, so that we can be able to invite or we have investors coming to Kenya and not moving out of Kenya. Number 2, Honourable Speaker, I'm impressed that this policy will able to handle the matters to do with double taxation or to handle trans-county taxation. Honourable Speaker, there are so many matters in court in this country. There are so many cases in court in this country that involves business people who have been charged double taxation from one county to another. Honourable Speaker, our transporter is moving from Elgeyo Marakwet to Uasin Gishu, to Nandi County, all the way to Kisumu. Honourable Speaker, you find that that transporter is charged or a tax is imposed on that transporter in the 5 counties. Honourable Speaker, this law or this tax policy must be able to review so that we have a standard taxation formula so that we avoid double taxation and trans-county taxation, which ultimately will be able to injure our investors in this country and not be able to rake in the money that we intend to get from taxation. So, Honorable Speaker, I support this policy. It is progressive, and I thank the Honorable Member from Molo, the Honorable Kimani Kuria, and of course the Chairman of Committee on Finance for this progressive policy, which is going to align the tax policy in this country, and we have a regime of law that will be able to be fair, to be transparent, to be credible, and to be predictable. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
The Honorable Ridikiri Mugambi. How did you put it?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I support this tax policy, but before I do that, I would like to point a few issues of concern in as far as taxes are concerned in this country. Mr. Speaker, because of lack of tax policy, there has been a very serious outcry out there because of the impact the taxes have on the low-income people of this country. Mr. Speaker, the tax is not done in such a way that it takes care of the low-income people of this country. Mr. Speaker, secondly, if what we have seen is that taxation has been done to the point that it has discouraged competitiveness in terms of businesses, particularly the low and medium-sized businesses. Mr. Speaker, we need to be very careful going forward because there has been a very serious problem in terms of tax evasions in this country. We have seen so many people evading paying taxes, and it is a loss of revenue to the country. Mr. Speaker, once the taxes are done, the consumer prices certainly shoots up, and it affects everybody in the Republic. Mr. Speaker, there is a danger of taxation being an impediment to the economic growth in this country. And therefore, would state this policy is being brought to address those kind of factors that have been witnessed by many Kenyans. Mr. Speaker, it's true that once we have a tax policy, it's going to be able to regulate the tax regime, is going to bring into force a good system of how the taxes need to be formulated and at what point do we need to revise. Mr. Speaker, this policy is aimed at aligning the government goals with the tax regime. And that's a very important point that the committee has brought forward. Mr. Speaker, we need to encourage foreign investors. Many investors close their businesses because if the taxations are so high, they will seek for other countries to go and invest. Mr. Speaker, we need to ensure that once the Kenyans are paid taxes, they are utilized for the social and economic responsibilities that the government has. This policy is going to align, therefore, our economic stability, our social funding, our investor confidence, at the same time, focusing on generation of revenue. I therefore, Mr. Speaker, feel that this policy is coming at the right time, and I think much of the problem that we are experiencing and hearing Kenyans cry is because we never had a policy. So I think going forward, we will see a lot of reviews of policies. We see a lot of adjustment in terms of policies. We will see the government addressing the tax matters, putting the correct legislation, and therefore, we will not have issues to do with the complaints that we are hearing. What I would say is that we must pay taxes There's no country in the world that does not pay taxes. We must pay taxes because we need service delivery. But taxes cannot only be the only source of revenue. We need to also look at other avenues on how we can make money, increase our investment so that we can have more income, which can be go forward to being ejected, to revenue to be ejected into the economy. I support.
Very well, I see a lot of interest on this. I can see a number of interests, including great minds on economics and finance, but the last bite will go to Honorable John Kawanjiku, and the rest of the members will have a bite on this next time. Proceed.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to contribute to this important bill. And I also want to rise and to be on record to congratulate the chairman for Finance Committee and the committee for coming up with such noble proposals of making sure that we are able to move our country forward, Mr. Speaker. I think tax is a very emotive topic, whereby that we have a lot of backlash with the community in terms of taxations and how far we can be able to stretch the 3 million people who earns through payslip, Mr. Speaker. And I think it is very important for this tax policy to be brought on board so that we can try as much as we can to increase our tax bracket so that we don't continue stretching further and continue overburdening the only people, 3 million young people or 3 million Kenyans who are paying taxes, Mr. Speaker. And therefore coming with these proposals, making sure that we are able now to target further, target the informal sectors, target the agriculture sector, target the MSMEs, and come up with methodology of making sure that each and everybody who belongs to this country is able to pay taxes, Mr. Speaker. Because there is no any other way of growing our economy, of bringing up development. There is no any other place that the government earns money or get revenue apart from taxes, Mr. Speaker. But we must also say that there must be a deliberate move to make sure that these policies are not overburdening the only people who are paying taxes, Mr. Speaker. We must also be able to broaden our nets and make sure that the informal sectors, whereby there is no formal way of making sure that we correct this revenue. When it comes to agriculture, there is no way to tax, or the government has been correcting revenue from those angles, Mr. Speaker. But you realize that some of those informal sectors, they're actually the one carrying the biggest load of the taxation, Mr. Speaker. The money corrected still go back again to build the informal sectors and the agriculture. Therefore, we are supporting the policies. We must say that even the Kenya Revenue Authority must come up with reforms that will help them to, to broaden their network and correct more taxes. Some of these issues that we're having as a country, they are issues that we can be able to resolve if each and every Kenyan is able to pay a very small amount of money as a revenue correction or tax to make sure that we don't even burden our country with loans and debts that now they are overboard, that we cannot even be able to sustain anymore because we don't have enough revenue to run our country, Mr. Speaker. This country belongs to all of us. We need development. We need to make sure that also these taxes are put into correct use, Mr. Speaker. The tax, after the correction of taxes, after making sure that we have corrected enough revenue, we must also make sure, Mr. Speaker, that the money is put into correct use. The issue of corruptions must be dealt with because there is no way Kenyans will be able to pay these taxes. And then if the taxes end up in a few people's pocket, Mr. Speaker. We must bring up, support the revenue correction, but at the same time, we must make sure prudent use of these taxes, Mr. Speaker. When it comes to government projects, when it comes to civil servants, we must make sure that there are check and balances, that every coin corrected must be put into correct use, Mr. Speaker, and even enhancing mechanisms of fighting corruptions, of fighting the EACC, of making sure that, the procurement process and all that, so that once the taxes have been corrected, we will make sure that there is prudent use of those resources, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, we support this tax policy, and it is high time that we review our tax policy, and we support the committee and the chair to make sure that they come up with a better terms and methodologies of making sure that we correct taxes. We support, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
We may be on our feet. Honorable members, on the time being 1:02 p.m., this House stands adjourned until today, Thursday, 30th November 2023 at 2:30 p.m.
At the second stage that senators will be debating this morning. This Heritage and Museums Bill is a bill by the Chairperson Standing Committee on Matters Social, Welfare and Labor. This morning, we expect a couple of cabinet secretaries to appear before the Senate. They include the cabinet secretary for matters national treasury and economic planning, as well as the prime cabinet secretary and the cabinet secretary for foreign affairs and matters diaspora. Honorable Musalia Mudavadi will be expected to tell the Senate what are the reasons for the Kenyan government in action in assisting as well as hastening the release of the pastoralists from Turkana County who were arrested at the Uganda border as well as charged in court martials in Moroto district in Uganda for crossing over in search of pasture during the recent drought experience in the country, as well as the measures government has put in place to intervene and ensure the release of the pastoralists. If you're just joining us, the business of the Senate is just about to commence. The Speaker of the Senate, Honorable Amason Kingi, is presiding over the business this morning. Allow me to hand over for this live broadcast brought to you by KBC in partnership with PBU. Enjoy your viewing.
Kwa nyadhifa za uongozi katika jamhuri yetu. Tukuomba tuwajalie tuyatende na kufikiria mambo yote yatakayofikishwa mbele yetu kwa njia ya haki na uaminifu ili kustawisha amani, ufanisi na heri ya nchi hii yetu na wale ambao haja zao umezikabidhi mikononi mwetu. Asante. Amen. Clerk, do we have quorum? Sergeant at arms, kindly ring the quorum bell for 10 minutes.
The Speaker of the Senate, Honorable Amason Kingi, currently presiding over the business this morning, has directed the Sergeant at Arms to ring the quorum bell. And this quorum bell is necessitated by the fact that at this particular moment, the House does not have the numbers to commence business this morning. And as you wait for senators to make their way into the chamber, having given a leeway of about 10 minutes, allow me to keep taking you through what is lined up for us in the order paper this morning. And the Cabinet Secretary for Matters National Treasury and Economic Planning, CS Njuguna Ndungu, will equally be appearing before the Senate this morning. The CS will be coming to the Senate plenary to answer questions raised by the Senator for Meru County, the Senator Kathuri Murungi, who equally serves as the Deputy Speaker of the House. The CS Treasury will be required to explain why there has been a delay in the disbursement of funds to the National Health Insurance Fund, popularly known as NHIF, which has led to the non-payment of approved claims of Kenya shillings 111.6 billion shillings to beneficiaries by the NHIF. And could the Cabinet Secretary provide timelines within which the funds amounting to 11.6 billion shillings will be released to the NHIF to enable timely payment of the approved claims to the intended beneficiaries? CS Treasury will finally be required to tell the House what measures has the government put in place to ensure there is expeditious disbursement of funds to pay the pending bills, as well as pending the planned establishment of a social health insurance fund to replace the existing National Health Insurance Fund. We also expect the Energy Cabinet Secretary, Honorable Churchill, to appear before the Senate this morning. The CS for Energy will be answering questions by the Senator for Kirinyaga County, Honorable Senator James Murango, that require CS Energy to explain the inordinate delay in the replacing defective power transformers in Kirigo, Maendeleo, as well as Riagasheru villages in Mwea constituency, despite multiple requests for replacement. And the Senator also wants to understand, is the Cabinet Secretary aware of the breakdown of over 15 government-owned power transformers in Kirinyaga County in the last 6 months? And if so, could the Cabinet Secretary explain the reasons behind it? And finally, the measures that the government has put in place to ensure that there is timely repair as well as replacement of the effective power transformers. The Senator for Kisii County, Senator Richard Onyonka, has questions before the Cabinet Secretary for Matters Energy as well. And Honorable Churchill will be required to provide detailed information on the government-to-government, popularly known as G2G agreement between Kenya and the Gulf counties, as well as countries, the Gulf countries rather, for the supply of fuel, including the terms of the agreement and the countries and the entities involved, and as well as the duration of the agreement. CS Churchill will also be telling senators what is the per litre cost